Ask AJ. So, Michael, you and I have spent a good portion of our career in healthcare, right? So, you heavily on the IT side, me heavily on the ops side. So we've got a perspective, and interestingly enough, you sometimes think IT and ops don't see eye to eye on things, but I think you and I, in this article that we did for Psychs Quarterly, really have some agreements on some things, especially now since we've been through COVID and everything that's been going on. Some things that healthcare systems really need to pay attention to, and they're not new, right? This stuff has been around for a long time.
Sadly, they has.
But I think now is an opportunity with, obviously with revenues, specifically in health systems, taking a hit because of the loss of elective surgeries, and money's tight, and they're reducing staffs to try to hit financials in some cases. These things now more than ever need to be addressed, and as we look at them, there are really three things that are pretty closely connected in what we addressed in the article. So I thought we'd just take one at a time and kind of, share our view and our opinion on why we think these things they've always been important. They've always been out there, but now why more than ever, we really need to think about how we solve these problems. And the first one was interoperability. You want to talk a little bit about what your thoughts are on why interoperability continues to be a problem?
Absolutely, AJ. At the most simplest form, interoperability is really a data flow, right? It's data flowing between systems. And when you make it sound that simple, it sounds, like that's a great thing, and we should absolutely do that. The complexity comes with some of the later topics like data security that we'll talk about. But it also comes in the disparity of all the systems, right? It'd be great if everybody used a system like an EHR, like Epic, or if every system and every provider was on Cerner. Then the data becomes standardized in a format. Sadly, that's not the case, right? There's well over 100 different EMRs, right? There's your big players, but when you get down to your local physician and such, they too key into an EMR or an EHR that often is not one of the big guys, and so the data becomes relevant data: your name, your address, your demographics, your visit information and such. But it's all in various formats, which makes trying to bring that data together and move it across platforms, so that when AJ goes and sees his physician provider, but then AJ has an event and needs to be in the hospital, that the hospitalist, right, the provider in the hospital, can see that you went to your physician and understand, what your blood pressure was, just the simplest of things. That doesn't really happen in a good way. And there's been a lot of steps to try to bridge that gap, right? Kind of the FHR, the FHIR standards and such, to try to standardize some of that data so that we can start to address that interoperability. But it really hasn't came far enough, and for sure hasn't came fast enough. And I think this pandemic really highlighted it, right? Just reporting to the government who has COVID-19. It was almost like a circus around how we got that data to the government so that we could track where we were having outbreaks. And by the time it got there, right, the pandemic had spread outside of where it was, because it took us weeks, not days, not hours, not minutes, not seconds, but weeks to get that hour collated, normalized, and analyzed. So that just really, the pandemic really highlighted the failure in healthcare around interoperability.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that, and there are a lot of reasons why we got to this place, right? There are these technologies that come into play. As you said, there are 100 or more EHR technologies. nobody's really set a standard for them. Everyone's kind of developed based off of their own idea of what it should look like. There is no governing body that is creating any standard of substance right now. So there's not an American National Standards Institute approach to this like there was back in the day for a claim form. Remember when the claim form for submission of medical bills got standardized at some point, and everybody used some variation of that version. So that never happened with a lot of this technology. And then you have the interests of those vendors and trying to protect their intellectual property, wanting to be distinct, wanting to be different. So that made it even more complicated. So, we've gotten to a point now, especially with some of the consolidation that has happened in all parts of the healthcare industry, whether that be third-party payers, whether it be the healthcare systems themselves, that you would think now would be as good a time as any and would be as opportune a time as any to start applying some of those standards, develop them. But somebody's got to step up and do that, right?
Yeah, and it really leads, right? There's also a kind of a psychological aspect to it too, right? We're in this, and we're dancing around our next topic of data security, but there's this fear of that information, your health information proliferating, right? And getting beyond that provider. And part of that is our, regulatory aspect that the HIPAA, that really wants to protect you as a patient and you as an individual and protect your information. And in doing so, right, that pendulum may be swaying just a little too far, right? You're a little overprotected because now everyone's afraid to share your information and be interoperable. So there's a great resistance to wanting to participate in that for fear of retribution from the regulatory aspect of HIPAA. And if I could project myself into the creators of HIPAA and what they were trying to do, I really don't believe that was their intent, right? Their intent was not to stifle interoperability. It was to protect personal health information and better control that so that it didn't get beyond, the reasonableness of the use, right? So and the psychological aspect that I allude to is that big brother effect, right? Like who has my health information? What are they doing with it? And I always jokingly say, anyone can have my health information. I'm not that interesting of a human being, right? If you really want to know what my doctor found in my knee issue and I've got a bad shoulder and you really want to know about that, hey, I just told you on video, right?
Yeah.
But there are, some folks that have some compromising medical conditions. And unfortunately, right, bringing in the social tones of the world right now, there are some folks that are being discriminated against because of their health situation. So it's a delicate balance for sure. But if we can solve it somehow, right, it alludes to kind of 3 points that we pointed out in the article. It improves the efficiency of care for sure. It gets you better and safer care. The more information as a provider that they have, the better diagnosis and better treatment plan they're going to give you. And then if you think about the cost right now of transferring data around between providers, right? A lot of it is still fax machines.
Oh, yeah.
Not e-fax. I didn't say e-fax. I said fax machines. Like thermal paper still rolling off of a box on somebody's desk.
Yeah.
That's still there, right? A lot of our rural providers and such, or smaller providers, haven't gone to e-fax even. And they sure haven't employed any type of RPA or AI to modernize that and make it move faster. So if we can interject those types of technologies, right, it will bring that human cost factor down, and those humans can go do more important things to better serve that patient.
Yeah, I think people think it's a joke when we talk about still the existence of fax machines operating in today's world, but it's absolutely true. And the system is so geared around, has historically been so built around records, written records, hard copy documentation for files and so on, that while there's been certainly been progress, there's still progress that needs to be made. And again, I think if we get to a stage where we can have some of these standard approaches, some standard guidelines on how systems need to be structured, how data needs to be tagged, or how it looks in talking between systems, then I think we can maybe finally get past that idea of, healthcare being the last bastion of the fax industry, as it has been for so many years.